Have you ever heard of a chimpanzee planning for tomorrow? Not reacting to today, not remembering yesterday, planning deliberately for a future state that does not yet exist, that the animal cannot currently perceive, sense, or feel any pressure from. A 2006 study found something close. A chimpanzee at a research station in Sweden selected and carried stones to a location in advance to use as projectiles against zoo visitors later in the day, a behavior that resembles planning. Researchers debated it for years, and the debate itself tells you something. When an animal does something that resembles human-style future planning, it becomes a major scientific event. When a human does it, it's Tuesday. This is the gap, not language, not tool use, not even intelligence in the way most people imagine it. The actual difference between humans and every other species on Earth is something stranger, harder to see, and far more consequential than any of the things usually listed. Start with what humans share with other animals, because the list is longer than most people expect. Tool use is not unique to humans. Chimpanzees strip leaves from twigs to fish termites out of mounds. New Caledonian crows manufacture hooked tools from twigs and have been observed bending wire into hooks in laboratory settings, a behavior never seen in the wild, produced on the spot to solve a novel problem. Dolphins use marine sponges to protect their snouts while foraging on the seafloor, a technique passed from mothers to daughters across generations. Communication is not unique to humans. Vervet monkeys have distinct alarm calls for different predators. One call for eagles, a different call for snakes, a different call for leopards, and other vervets respond appropriately to each call, taking cover from above, looking down, or climbing trees depending on which call they hear. This is referential communication. The call refers to something specific in the world. Even some forms of culture are not unique to humans. Different chimpanzee populations have different tool traditions, different grooming behaviors, different ways of cracking nuts, passed down through observation and imitation, persisting across generations, varying by group, the way human customs vary by region. So if tools, communication, and culture all exist elsewhere in the animal kingdom, what is actually different about humans? The answer researchers keep arriving at is recursion. Recursion is the ability to embed one thought inside another, indefinitely. To think about thinking, to imagine someone else imagining something, to take an idea and place it inside a structure, then place that structure inside another structure with no fixed limit on how many layers deep you can go. Human language is built on recursion in a way no other communication system is. Take the sentence. The dog that the cat that the mouse scared chased ran away. This sentence is grammatically valid. It is also almost impossible to parse on first read, because it embeds three separate subject-verb relationships inside each other. The mouse scared the cat chased the dog ran away, nested like Russian dolls. No animal communication system observed anywhere has this property. Vervet alarm calls are powerful, but a vervet cannot produce a call that means, the leopard that the eagle was hunting is now hunting me. The structure does not exist in their communication system because the underlying cognitive architecture does not support it. This matters because recursion is not just a feature of language. It is the foundation of nearly every uniquely human cognitive achievement. Planning for the future requires recursion. To plan, you must hold a representation of a future state, and within that representation, hold a representation of yourself acting within that future state, and within that, a representation of the outcomes of those actions, and within that, a representation of how those outcomes affect a future state beyond that one. It is representations nested inside representations, projected forward through time. Theory of mind requires recursion. To understand that another person has beliefs, you need to represent their mind. To understand that they might have a false belief, that they think something is true, which you know is false, you need to represent their representation of the world. To understand that they might be trying to deceive you, you need to represent their representation of your representation of their intentions. Each layer is a thought embedded inside a thought embedded inside a thought. Some primates show partial theory of mind. Chimpanzees can track what another individual has or hasn't seen and adjust their behavior accordingly, concealing food from a dominant individual who didn't witness where it was hidden, for example. This is real, but the depth is limited. Human children, by around age 4, can reliably pass false belief tests that require reasoning about what someone else falsely believes about a third person's beliefs. 3 layers of nested representation. No non-human animal has been shown to reliably manage more than 1 layer. This is the actual gap. Not a difference in kind at the first layer. Many animals have something. The gap is in how many layers deep the architecture can go before it breaks. And this connects directly to the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain most associated with planning, abstract reasoning, and recursive thought, is proportionally larger in humans than in any other primate. But the difference is not simply size. The human prefrontal cortex has a higher density of a specific type of neural connection, long-range connections that allow different brain regions to communicate with each other across greater distances, integrating information from multiple systems simultaneously. Some researchers describe this as the brain having more working memory slots, more simultaneous threads of thought that can be held active and cross-referenced at once. A chimpanzee can hold a thought. A human can hold a thought, about a thought, and keep all 3 active simultaneously, and notice when one of them contradicts another. This single capability, recursive nested representation, run through a brain architecture that can sustain multiple layers without collapsing, is the seed from which almost everything considered uniquely human grows. Language is recursive grammar applied to communication. Mathematics is recursive structure applied to quantity. A number system where you can always add one more, where operations can be nested inside operations indefinitely. Music with complex harmonic structure is recursive pattern applied to sound. Storytelling, a story within a story, a character imagining another character's perspective, is recursion applied to narrative, money, law, religion, government. These are what anthropologists call fictive structures. Agreements that exist because enough people simultaneously hold a shared representation of something that has no physical form. A dollar bill is paper. The value is a shared recursive belief. I believe that you believe that everyone believes this paper is worth something, held simultaneously by millions of people who have never met. No other species on Earth has anything resembling this. Not because other species lack value or exchange or social structure, because the cognitive architecture required to sustain a belief about a belief about a belief, shared across a population of millions, simply does not exist outside the human brain. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. This capability did not evolve because it was useful for any single thing. It appears to be a side effect, an emergent property of a brain that got large enough and interconnected enough for other reasons, primarily related to social complexity in early hominin groups. Tracking relationships, alliances, and reputations across a large social group requires significant cognitive overhead. The brain that evolved to manage human social politics happened to cross a threshold where recursive thought became possible. And once that threshold was crossed, everything else followed. Not because it was selected for, but because it was suddenly available. Humans did not evolve to do calculus, write symphonies, or build governments. The brain that can do those things was shaped by something much smaller and more mundane. Keeping track of who owes who a favor in a group of 150 people. The recursive architecture that makes those social calculations possible turned out to be general purpose. It could be pointed at anything: numbers, sounds, stories, other minds, the future itself, This raises a question that researchers have approached carefully because the implications run in directions that are difficult to sit with. If the thing that makes humans different from other animals is not a special ingredient, not a soul, not a uniquely human essence, not something added to the animal kingdom from outside, but simply a threshold of recursive depth that a sufficiently large, sufficiently interconnected brain happened to cross, then the difference between humans and other animals is quantitative, not qualitative, a matter of degree, not of kind. Some animals have one layer of recursion. Humans have many. The gap feels enormous because each additional layer multiplies what is possible exponentially. But the underlying architecture is not different in nature. It is different in depth. And if that's true, the question becomes, what would an animal with one more layer than humans currently have look like? What would it be capable of that is as invisible to us as theory of mind is to a vervet monkey? The vervet cannot conceive of what it's missing. It has no representation of the layer above its own. By definition, neither could we. The chimpanzees in Sweden, who carried stones in advance, were operating at the very edge of what their architecture allows, a single layer of future state representation, executed inconsistently, debated by scientists for years, because it was so close to the boundary that it was hard to confirm. Humans live so far past that boundary that we built civilizations entirely out of recursive abstractions and forgot they were abstractions at all. The gap between a chimpanzee and a human is not language or tools or culture. Those are downstream. The gap is depth. How many thoughts can be held inside other thoughts before the structure collapses? Humans found out by accident what happens when that number gets large enough. We are still finding out.